thank you everyone for coming out on this rather chilly night. Tonight we've got Vincent Dirks here. He's going to be presenting to us on 3 agile testing lessons that he's learned at TradeMe. I'd just like to cover some intro stuff. So first, thanks to our sponsors, Assurity, ASB, and Searle. Jim's at the back there from Searle. Yay for Searle for booking the rooms and taking care of the events. Restrooms. Jim, while you're there, where are the restrooms?
The restrooms are straight out the back and up the stairs, the women's and men's restroom, up the first flight of stairs. The fire exit are actually in the far corner. There's the door in the corner of the building on the left, or you can go up the stairs and out the main entrance. Either of those will do.
Cool, thanks. So the timing for this, we're going to have up to around 50 minutes of talk, and then we'll have a few questions. With the questions, we'll be handling it with Slido. I put the link up there, www.slido.do. If you log in there using the event code #APN, you'll be able to register questions, and we'll take the ones that have been voted on the highest at the end, and we'll ask a few of them. There's also information about the wireless network, if you need that, on the top right-hand corner. All right, and shall we get into it? Over to Vincent.
Cool. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is the first time I'm talking to as many people as this. This is my first time. It's a night of many firsts for me. It's the first time I'm using slides, to be honest, at a presentation like this. Most of the time on a whiteboard. It's the first time I'm being recorded. So please excuse me if I fall short of some of the higher achieving people at presentations. Right, I'm an Agile Test Analyst at TradeMe. Who likes the new Kev, by the way? Kev is what the Kiwi logo that we have. You know, stick your hand up if you like the Kev logo. Stick your hand up if you like the old Kev logo. Who likes the old Kev logo? No one? Really? Sorry? What does it look like? I'm not allowed to use logos, apparently, on the template. So this is what he looks like now. I must admit, I felt a certain warmth for the old Kev, but I'm warming up to this guy, and I'll be keen to see how they like to dress Kev up for different events or days. Like May the 4th is always a good date to check the Kiwi logo, especially if you like lightsabers and Star Wars. Right, I'm an Agile software test analyst. Oh, look at forgot the capitalization on the S there. I'm a tester, as you can see. I start seeing things, but some of these slides were prepared early hours of the morning. Probably a little bit underprepared, but I kind of like to be a little bit fluid with things. If you see something on there, let me know that you disagree with. I'm kind of new to testing. Started about 3.5 years ago. But I've really gone at boots and all, so by all means, if there's experienced testers out there, I could be wrong. I'm even newer to Agile. I started with TradeMe about 1.5 years ago, and that was my first company that did Agile. My test philosophy is context-driven testing, essentially published by James Buck and Michael Bolton. I know those guys, and they challenged me to be a better tester, but we'll come back to context-driven testing in a moment. Now, for me, what I've found that Agile is at TradeMe is autonomy with responsibility, and that people are given genuinely the power to control how they do stuff, to some degree what they do, but obviously the product owner tends to provide information and guidance on that, and responsibility. The company trusts you to do your job well. Agile, let's be honest. We've got some new people here, we've got some older people here. I'd like to see who hasn't seen the Agile values. And we're a supportive, welcoming environment. If anyone's not seen those values before, just stick your hand up, let me know. Everybody's seen them? Okay, quick reiteration. Individual interactions over pros and tools, working software over documentation, customer collaboration with contract negotiation, and responding to change. These things are going to kind of drive the lessons that I feel I've learned. Well, I hope I have. Okay, now, context-driven principles. I'm guessing fewer people will have seen this. This is more to do with testing than anything else. Who's seen or heard about context-driven testing and knows a little bit about these principles? I know there's at least one person. There's 2 people, 3. And there's a few people. Okay, well, that's good. I know there's a lot of text here. I just want to quickly whip through them just to show that context-driven testing really is a kind of agile version of testing in general in my mind. The value of any practice depends on the context. So in other words, there are no best practices. What you do is what you decide is important to do at any point in time. You respond to the things that need to be done, and you identify the things that are irrelevant and no need to be done. There is no one gold standard with testing. You simply need to use your intelligence to determine what are the important bits. Here we get the agile, working together. We're not, things aren't predictable. It has to be a good solution, and if it doesn't work, it hasn't satisfied the need that exists. It's a challenging intellectual process. That's an important one. If you're just turning the handle, if you've got a test script in front of you and you're just going tick, 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 cross, let the guy know, that's not really testing my book. You've got to be thinking about why am I testing this bit and why is it important. The last one, I couldn't find anything to bold in there, so the whole thing is really important to me, that it is through judgment and skill. So in other words, you need to know what you're doing and you need to figure out why it's important. Exercise cooperatively. You're in a team, so therefore you've got to fit in with the people that are around you. And really to do the right things at the right times. So test the important things. Be aware of what is important, which things are risky as opposed to which are the things that are edge cases that aren't really that important. We need to have those things foremost in our mind when we're testing. Like I said before, to me, Agile is those 3 things: autonomy, responsibility, and trust. Autonomy and responsibility only really happen because of trust. So in other words, we control how we do our work. I think that's really important. And I find it really empowering for me that within TradeMe we get a chance to really decide how it is we're going to do things and how we're going to deliver the things. And although we have access to wonderful people and resources around us that can help us do that, very infrequently are we told, thou shalt do this. It's always a case of, give me the time to convince you why I think you should do it this way, but in the end, it's the squad that usually decides how we're going to do things. But conversely, we have the responsibility to do this stuff as best as we can. We need to be passionate about what it is that we're trying to develop. And one of the things I really like about TradeMe, they've got a really good recruitment process where everyone that's there has that spark, that passion for wanting to do the best thing for the product and for the people that use that product. Yeah, we don't agree what that means sometimes, but we're really committed to trying to explore those things. And sometimes we butt heads, but the things we come back the next day and we say, I thought about what you said, and I think I could probably moderate what I was talking, and you end up exploring things and all the wonderful personal interactions with a full richness of different cultural backgrounds that come to play in there as well. But in the end, we trust. We trust the people in the squad to do the best thing for the squad and for the company. We expect that we can trust the business. The business has to do certain things to allow us to be able to do our job. The water has to keep flowing and the lights have to keep on, the air conditioning needs to keep heating the room, etc. And likewise, the business needs to trust us. So focusing on trust for me is a really important aspect of Agile. Just a quick touch on the version or the flavour of Agile that we have. I know Spotify don't like it when we talk about the Spotify model, but they've made it famous. So we see the vertical groups, which are our squads. Okay, they're quite small. My squad, the core of it really is about 4 or 5 people. And we work together in a small pod, and we have access to a number of people resources. And as we share a BA with another squad, we have close proximity to the designers. And then as things get a little bit further apart, we have support from platform and database who are in Wellington. But we're quite well connected electronically. At the top, we've got the product owner who kind of is part of, has a foot inside the squad boundary in terms of helping us, guide us, and kind of deciding what are the next most important things to do from an epic to epic work scenario. The thing that I really like about TradeMe, that it did my head in to begin with, was how what we do is determined often by the PO. How we do our professional responsibilities, you know, is if I need to know how to test a certain feature, I go to my chapter or my guild, where I find the test guild in TradeMe is particularly strong. We have a Slack channel, and it is one of the busiest channels in TradeMe, and we take the piss out of people. We share jokes and funny things, but a lot of the time we also just try and find out, how do I do this? It's amazing how quick that community responds with really useful information. So it comes back to that trust in terms of trust your own sense of whether you understand something well enough and know when to ask for help. The team that you work in needs to be able to trust you to ask for the help when you need it. So I think that's quite important. Right, you have a job as an audience as well. I want you to engage with me. I saw a few hands up. This half of the room is winning at the moment, folks. Okay. I want you to question. Your job is to challenge me. I may be new to testing and new to Agile, but I find I get a lot of motivation from doing a presentation like this to help me learn more, and that's your job. Okay, so I want interruptions, I want questions. If you've got something that you disagree with, hand up, and I'm happy to delve off track from my presentation and discuss a topic if you think it's worth doing that at this point, and I can share with you what I do at TradeMe.
When you work in that model, it's all well and good when things are going to plan, but how do you prevent things from going upside down? And when that does happen, you're just an odd person who's not quite living up to the expectations of colleagues and the company, etc. So how do you kind of keep a structure within what you do, and how do you make sure that 4 individuals who are working, say, on a project or an initiative, their own intelligence and their approach aligns and collectively actually means something, and they're not kind of all going in each other's direction?
If I can distill the question, how do we make sure that everybody's on the same page? How are we aligned? There's a lot of agile processes that we try and pick up and learn, and some work well, some don't work well. Making sure that the squad goes out for a coffee once a week. You have a chinwag. Make sure that people have empathy and a connection with people. Make sure that you communicate the things that are on your mind. Probably that's a slightly wider question that we could probably discuss after. Some of those things will come through, but alignment of the squad and making sure the squad works as a cohesive unit is hard. You know, as soon as you get 3 people in a room, you've got politics happening, right? And there's no guarantee any 2 people are going to get along. But that's the beauty of Agile, in the sense that you need to have that passion and that spark for being there. If you know that everybody around you, if they're getting annoyed with you, they're only doing it because they're frustrated because of their own standards of how they want the squad to work. But know that they're passionate about the product. They're not against you as a person. It's the idea that you may have brought to them that might frustrate them. Okay, as long as everybody's committed to doing the best product that you can in the situation or in the context that's available, that's really invigorating in my mind, and that keeps people coming back to the table all the time. If you see someone who withdraws from the team, that's a problem, and you need processes and people in place to try and bring that back together. But that's kind of like a delivery manager or a squad master type thing to do.
Vincent, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the values is don't be a dick. So there's quite a lot of pressure on people to be well behaved, if I understand that correctly.
Yes, value number 7. It's the most quoted value in the world. TradeMe values, if you look them online, number 7 is don't be a dick. It came from Sam Morgan, who set up TradeMe 16 years ago in a television interview, and it's stuck. It really has. It has its purpose, for sure, and we expect people to do the right thing, and that's where that passion comes from. Don't be a dick is the reverse of that, don't be bad, but I think we try and strive for more than that. We try and be good, and to... as our value number 1, which is to deliver awesome online experiences. Cool. The 3 lessons. How do we know when fast is too fast? Agile is about doing things, getting it out the door, and being super responsive and doing things quickly. But at some point, you are going to go too fast. Things are going to break, and you're going to do something silly. Right. So in the subline there, testing there, in my mind, is the thing that helps keep a check on going too fast. Lesson number 2, can Agile help you do less regression testing? Absolutely. I almost do just about no regression testing, which may seem a bit funny given that we've got about 300 or 400 tech people changing the site about 4 or 5 times a day. But we'll go through why I think Agile helps us do that. And lastly, are formal acceptance criteria efficient? Really, what do acceptance criteria do for us? And is there a better way to do that, or not so much a better way, a more efficient way given that we're Agile? Acceptance criteria work in many, many places, but I think we could possibly consider doing them a slightly different way if you're genuinely Agile. Right. When is fast too fast? Agile's about speed, all right? Okay, let's go fast. Okay, do you reckon we can go any faster? Let's do a retrospective at the end of a sprint. What did we do that we didn't really need to do to go faster? Let's trim that off. Let's go faster again and repeat the process. Oh, crikey, testing. Oh, God, that's just, what does that do for us? Does that actually give us anything that's going to deliver a better product? Yeah, possibly, but really in the end, you're just testing that it works, right? And the devs already made sure it works on their machine. And really, testing just slows things down. For crying out loud, it's ready to go, Vince. Deploy. And we're not adding anything to the code. And so like, oh, yeah, it's ready to go. It's ready to go, says the dev to the delivery manager. And the tester says, yeah, hang on a minute. I just haven't quite done all my testing. Yeah, but your testing never finds bugs. Well, actually it does, but you don't remember. Right. Working software over documentation. I had a dev tell me, Vince, just look, I know you want to know what's going on, and I know you want a little bit more documentation and stuff like that, or a little bit more understanding what's going on, but you don't need it. The software works. I've done a quick thing of it. Agile says working software over documentation. And I kind of said, oh, God, that felt like a big stick on my back, So like, it's like quality doesn't matter anymore. And I had this discussion, and that butting up exercise that we did in terms of how things should be done, I'd been away for a little bit of time. The dev kind of had a little bit more string to pursue their own things. And I came back, and it was a nightmare, to be honest. But it was one of those telling moments for me where even though I got really pissed off with him, and he got really pissed off with me, a few days later, when we kind of things I noticed he was starting to do the things that I thought were missing from whilst I was away. And at the same time, I was kind of expecting, doing a little bit more of where he was. And even though we didn't actually say we agreed on doing something in the middle, that's where it ended up anyway. And I think that's part of the alignment process. Knowing that you can disagree with people, you can get annoyed and angry at the thing that's happening, but in the end, those discussions keep going and you end up closer together and you end up in a place which is more a consensus of where you want to be. And essentially, the dev got into this pattern of deliver, damn, anything, just get it out there, do it now. But I kept coming back to, we need to think a little bit harder about what we need to do. And I think as a tester, that's an important part of what I need to do is I don't need to know how to dev. I don't need to know how to do a whole bunch of them. I don't need to know how to do the graphics design of things. But I do need the ability to think about the things that those people care about and know how to assess quality in other people's perspectives. So thinking a little bit harder about exactly what's needed. When you develop a full throttle, who's seen a burn-up chart before? Cool. Is there anyone that would like me just to quickly run through what a burn-up chart is? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so Agile, we break down our epic into little stories. We try and make them as small as we can. Each story gets given a certain number of points, a certain amount of effort required to produce them. It's a number. And what they've done here is the blue line is what they call the scope, which is the number of stories in the system and adding up all the points that add up to what the functionality that's required to deliver a solution to a given problem. Okay, so we get lots of stories, and as we're going through, we discover more things that may need to be done, or we may find that things don't need to be done. So here we can see the beginning. Okay, so we've clarified a few things that we need to do. As we go along, we find more things we need to do. Things are stable. Oh, we're going to dip a little bit, and we get to this point here. The red line here is the number of stories that we say are done, that are being deployed, that are out there. Okay, so is that a red line? I'm colorblind, I presume it is. Let's call it a red line. The red line has got to catch up to the blue line before the epic is done. Okay, and an epic, in my sense, is a big chunk of work. A couple of months, maybe 6 months worth of a big project that needs to be done. Now imagine, you can't see that bit there. Let's cover it up. Oh wow, we're trucking along. We're doing well. We're going so fast. And then the tester comes in. Oh shit, we've completely forgot something. And all of a sudden your scope goes up. And this point here is really telling, you kind of think, shit, we're almost done. But all of a sudden, something or someone has found, we've forgotten to do something really important, and all of a sudden, the project is going to take twice as long to get there. And the thing I want people to remember is that the points that we need to achieve to finish the epic is all lined up. They're all end to end in the same direction. So if it's a drag race, okay, which is really misleading. The product roadmap, or the things that we need to do, is never straight. We can't see the end of the road. The road has got bends in it, and it will throw all sorts of surprises at you. And the question is, how do you find those bends? How do you find the problems that you haven't seen? How are you going to find the moose that's in the middle of the road after a blind corner? And the only way that you're not going to hit that moose is by making sure that you're not going so fast. You don't spend all your time looking at burn-up charts. Okay, burn-up charts are interesting, they're useful, they help you to do all sorts of things. But here, it looks like you're done. But all of a sudden we find we're not. And the people that find that tend to be the testers. In the end, the thing that I think that controls speed is our assessment of quality. And that quality assessment that we're doing is, I don't know whether anyone knows the dead canary scenario in a mine. In a mine, if you take a little canary with you, if there's poisonous gases around that have come out of the coal, the canary dies first, and you get an opportunity to get out before you suffocate from whatever poisonous stuff is there. And quality is that for me for an Agile project. Well, any project, to be honest. So we need to think about what does a lack of quality look like. It can be almost anything, really. You know, did we not do enough testing? Is the quality of the testing not enough? Did we not cover enough of the scenarios to find the likely issues? Did we go so quick that we didn't think ahead far enough and create an architecture that can support the infrastructure that you've now built on it in the future? Are we going so fast, copying, pasting code right through the code without consolidating it into a single function? Are we introducing too much technical debt as we're going along so that things won't scale in the future very well? Now, you may well be able to deliver something today, but it's going to decrease your ability to deliver something in the future, and it may make your ability to fix bugs much harder. For the same sake, sometimes things have got to get out so quick, and you kind of remember, oh shit, we've got to do the code review, or a test review, a test plan review. And you might just say, look, I haven't got the time we've got to get this out quickly. Can you just have a quick look at the code review, or have a look at the test plan that I've written? And if they spend 5 minutes on it, and if you've worked on it for 2 days, do you think they're going to do a good job of that review? Are they going to find the genuine issues that might be in there? So don't forget to make sure that quality gets built in from the beginning. One thing I find with TradeMe, which took me a while to absorb, was that anything that happens to the squad or that the squad is doing or responsible for can never be broken down to less than the squad. When something is broken, it's the squad's responsibility. It's their responsibility to fix it. It isn't the fact that it was slipped past the tester, because the dev wrote it, and the BA didn't pick up on some scenario that wasn't implemented. And that this whole idea of you can never break, it's like an atom in the sense that there are moving parts in an atom. They all do different things, protons, neutrons, electrons. Where's Jim? He just told me he was a nuclear physicist. And there's bits less than, that are even smaller than those particles that I mentioned. But really in everyday life, you can't break things down to less than the squad. If you work in an agile workplace and you have squads, the moment you identify a single person for anything, think again and say, is it the squad that's responsible for that? Either good or bad, and recognize that you should leave the squad to handle whatever issue it is that's thrown up. And quality, listen to your heart and your head. As you're working, doing stuff as a developer, as a test analyst, a BA, or whatever your role might be in the Agile environment, you kind of know when you're not doing the best job around. Make sure that you understand what pressures are causing you to not do as good a job as you might, and reevaluate all the time whether that time pressure is something that is just here and now. Yeah, we've told the share market and the people that we're going to have a price change. That's going to happen on that date. That date can't move, all right? So in other words, my testing is going to be confined. Even if I find a big problem, it's not going to have more time. So in other words, I need to make sure that I do the important stuff, and we know that we can't do the smaller. So it's less quality in there. But that's an informed decision. But in the long term, you've got to remember, listen to your heart and your head. Is the job worthwhile to deliver the kind of quality that you're able to do in the resources and time that you've got to do that? And in the end, like I've mentioned before, listen to your testers. In the end, testers eat, breathe, and live quality. And they try and assess quality from many perspectives. They try and put themselves in the user's shoe. They put themselves into a system view. And they try and look for things that might be surprising to someone that matters and that's important, and then to sort of like check, hey, did you realise it does this? Is that important to you? And you ask that question of the person who knows about that particular issue. You know, it might be an architectural thing, but it might be a user thing. So whoever you go to, you need to approach them with something that they may be concerned about, and then assess whether that's something worth fixing. To help the squad get through the roadmap, which we know is a winding road at times. Sometimes it's a nice long straight motorway and you can go really quick. But use your testers. I think it's James Buck and that came up with this quote, that they're the headlights of a project. You know, they're the people that are looking forward and they try and identify where things might come off the road. And if they spend extra time testing, they've got a hunch. And they are trying to make sure that we're not going to go so fast that we're going to end up off the road.
Just had a question about that. I was just wondering, I can definitely see how the testers would in most cases be the people who would see trouble ahead. I also wondered whether, like business analysts and product owners, whether they would also have that role, because they would be the ones who would be in contact with the clients and that sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And like in some ways, I've broken my own rule in terms of don't look at things that are less than the squad. I've identified one role there within that squad. And really, in the end, the squad is responsible for quality, and everybody joins in that discussion. It's just testers tend to be the people that have the professional, not responsibility, but the professional experience to be able to identify.
Really, it's a mindset.
Yep.
It's kind of like a personality that they bring as well.
Yep.
They
And
get attracted to that role because they have that kind of foresight when they're looking for trouble. That's why they.
oh yeah, we look for trouble. I like that. Yes, testers look for trouble.
I think that's, you know.
Yeah.
I can see the appeal of testing, because it is kind of like looking for problems before they occur, so that they just don't occur.
Yep. And I think it's important for testers to have that testing discussion with the squad, and the squad can only but absorb that test discussion in the same way that testers are, I feel, should be expected to contribute to the architecture of a solution or the code of a solution, but we just need to recognise that we haven't had 6 years of C# experience. You know, so we need to trust and rely on the dev to give that information, but at the same token, we expect them to share how things work so that everybody in the team can kind of, in some ways, live their pain, have a bit of empathy for the thing that they're doing, but also understand what that means in terms of delivering the change or the feature that you're trying to implement. Cool. That's the end of the first lesson that, well, hopefully I've learned. Any further questions before we move on? Cool. Right, the second lesson. Can Agile help us do less regression testing? You know, are there really other ways to mitigate the regression risk? First, let's kind of pull it apart in the sense that what's regression? You know, it's in my mind really just the unintentional loss of prior functionality. You know, as we're trying to put a new feature in, but hey, we might break something that it used to do. So regression testing is, it's test everything it used to do in layman's terms. And really, in a sense, there's just nothing more complicated about regression testing, but it's boring because you're going to do changes. That's your job, right? Or that's the squad's job, introducing changes and introducing new features to a product. But the product does loads of stuff already. And especially if you look at TradeMe, it's a huge website. It's got hundreds of people developing code for hours and hours on end, and you're going to test every feature? Don't think so. So really, for big, complicated applications, regression testing is just expensive, both in dollars and in time. You know, are we going to deploy today, or are we going to deploy in 6 months' time? And really, there's a lost opportunity cost for having a new feature or a new product out there. So in comes Agile. Agile delivers small changes, does it fast and often. Every one of these changes can break a product. Okay? And we want to make sure that we don't break the product. So we're going to do full regression testing on every small change. We're going to do it lots and often. Yeah, no. There's no way that we can release, if we're going to take that approach, full regression testing for every deploy that we do, we can't do that. So we have to focus on what's the important testing to do. And generally speaking, you want to focus on the change that you've introduced, and you want to use your understanding of how the system works to identify the things that might break. Okay, so this is where that judgment and that skill and that risk assessment of a tester comes in. Now, someone's going to say automation. I've already heard the word before. That's a really big discussion, and we could have a week-long interaction on that, and maybe we can have that. That would be fun. But if we can keep automation off the menu, out of scope for this meeting, that'd be really cool. Right, regression testing mitigates the risk of regression failures in production. A regression failure in production costs us money. Site goes down or application doesn't work. So we want to test to make sure that those failures don't happen in production. Or do we? Because the risk really is, the chance, the probability of something bad happening times the cost of how bad it is. So now, if we break it down, the cost of something bad happening is really proportional. Usually you lose. Like TradeMe is in the order of hundreds or thousands of dollars a minute. Okay, so if the site's down for a minute, that's quite a lot of money lost. So in other words, the rate of lost earnings is important in here. Okay, so we need to know how important is this change? How likely is it that it's going to completely turn the tap off of money flowing into our bank account? And then also that's multiplied by the time taken to deploy a fix. How fast can we get a fix out there? If we have working in a company, in a scenario where we're not agile, okay, and we're kind of old waterfall or whatever scheme you want to use, generally speaking, we have big volumes of changes with infrequent releases. We might work on a project and we're going to deploy that. We know we're going to release it in 6 months' time. So we better make sure that everything's done right, everything works. But a big volume of change, crikey, you're introducing 10%, 30% of the code, whatever the fraction is, in one deploy. What's the likelihood that you've broken something? I reckon there's a pretty good likelihood if you're going to change your code that much that something's going to break, something's not going to work. And then you're only deploying once every 3 months, 6 months, or however long it is. It's not something that you're good at. It's not something that you practice at. It's not something where you're going to know to recognize early telltales or have the monitoring tools in place that you thought you might have needed to check that something's working. You just don't know these things because you haven't had the experience, because you only get to do it once in a blue moon. But the chance of badness with Agile, we do small changes. If I change 0.01% of the code, how likely is it that that bit of code is going to change? It's going to break the system. For sure. I could delete in one line the auction table in TradeMe, and I think the site will come down with that. So yeah, we need to use our intelligence, our judgment, our skill to assess the change, how risky it is. So in other words, small volume of changes, we have a lower chance of things going bad, for sure. But we do these releases frequently. We deploy changes, tiny little changes. We group them up in usually about 3 or 4, and we do 2 of them in a deploy window in the morning. We do another 2 in the afternoon. So 4 times a day, the website's updated. Nobody really finds out. We don't take the site down to do this. So every day, so every week, we run through all these changes so people get to see, what does it feel like when things go wrong? Oh, well, we've got big monitors on the wall throughout the company that have the error graph. So we see all the HTML 500 errors, the critical errors. And everybody knows, I wonder who's done that. And you know, you kind of think, oh shit, how are they going to do that? You know, you might just look at the Slack channel that we use to communicate these things. So we have the Slack channel. We see what's going on. People say, oh, releasing to production now. Oh, hang, let me check out the errors, see what's happening. Oh, that's broken. I'll just watch what they're doing. You know, I can see those errors have gone up. Oh, they've asked for a rollback. I wonder how you do that. Okay, so the system's in place to do deploys, to do them efficiently and fast, to have the tools in place to be able to know when things are going wrong. So we can do a deploy quickly, and we can deploy a fix quickly as well, because we're practiced at it. So really, smaller stories. We're not going to break the site with a small thing, most likely. Smaller changes also generally mean that the rate at which you might lose things. I work in the motors vertical, so most of the code that I test and work on is just related to used cars. So the likelihood that we are going to take the entire TradeMe site down is really quite small. We do have some process, what we call the cell process, that's shared amongst all the different verticals in TradeMe. And by golly, if I start working on that, I double the amount of time that I'm going to test on that. Right? I'm going to be that bottleneck. I'm going to test that we haven't broken it for property or for jobs, because it's just a riskier thing to do. We have small focused teams. If you've got a team of 20 or 30, do you think everybody knows how to interact with everybody else? Does everybody even know who's someone else's name? So in other words, if you need those people in order to implement a fix, you're kind of thinking, oh God, how do I work with them? That's not a question to ask when something's just broken on the site. So having a small team, a small squad of about 4 or 5 people where you know and trust each other well means that you can work as a team rather than a group of individuals. The squad owns its own development process, and that's the whole process of making the changes and getting them through to deployment. They own how they do it. They get autonomy to make changes to that process, as long as it doesn't upset other people. But they then know that. They have a stake in that. So in other words, they know each other. They know the process. They deploy frequently, so they're good at doing it. So if shit really hits the fan, they can rely on that and quickly do the stuff that's required to get a fix out to production again. So we have streamlined delivery processes, and an important part of your delivery process is your ability to roll back. You know, oh crikey, shit, we broke something. Roll it back quickly. And there's different versions of rollback that you may need depending on database changes versus software-only changes. So in the end, we spend less time losing money. So in the end, Agile teams developing smaller stories and delivered efficiently mitigates the risk of costly regression failures in production, because we're reducing the cost of them. So I don't need to do a lot of regression testing because we've mitigated the risk, which is the chance times the cost, by reducing the cost of deploying a fix, which minimizes the cost of the regression testing. And now that opens up a window for us to really maximize the test effort on the genuine risks, the changes that we're introducing. Cool, but wait, there's more. But I'm not going to go there. I don't think I've got time. We may get there at the end. If you work in a large team of testers, and you work on the same product, like what I do at TradeMe, and each tester has at least one test environment for themselves. There are 40+ testers in TradeMe. We have, I think, 36 different test environments. So there's lots of places where the same software sits, and there's lots of different code branches in each one of those test environments. And we get a chance to kind of inject our code into other people's places, kind of under the hood without other people noticing, which is another way of regression testing. But we can come back to that later.
Why are they different? Just because of different operating system environments?
Sorry, the test environments?
Why do they some use it?
So that we can all have one and not affect other people. So we tend to have we've got 6 database servers that are identical in their configuration, and they get refreshed with a subset of production data, obviously scrubbed with any privacy issues. And then each one of those databases has, I think, 7 web servers that sit on top of that and serve out of that. And essentially, each tester has an environment that only they use, and other people are expected to use other environments. So it just isolates you from the other changes that are going on in the whole company.
And sorry, just quickly, how do you keep each of those environments up to date with the 4 changes per day?
We have code branches that each story is related to. They're actually named with the name of the story that we use. And one of the processes that we need to do is merge from the default branch that's in production. And in fact, the platform team have made an almost bulletproof implementation of Mercurial, and even the testers can now do a lot of that merging. So testers getting involved with code changes. So we learn from the devs. They give us guidance on these things. They put lots of bells and whistles, and if it's not a plain vanilla merge, if there's some conflicts that happen, then obviously we kind of say, Mr. or Miss Dev, can you please help us? But most of the time there's no conflicts because the stories change only a small amount of the code.
So you update your environment a few times a day?
As and when required. But yeah, if it's more than a few days old, we get reminded that, hey, you haven't updated from default for a while. Sometimes the changes end up making a change in the database server, or the database, which is then shared by those 7 other test environments. So we need to be careful with those things. And periodically somebody will say, hey, we've just deployed this change that requires a database change, and if the 2 aren't in sync, you're going to create errors. So we are told, make sure you get a merge from default before you put your next branch into a test environment. Right, next lesson. Are formal acceptance criteria efficient? Sorry, any further questions on doing less regression testing? All good? Are formal acceptance criteria efficient? Now really, what purpose do they fulfill? And really is, given that we're agile, okay, so obviously acceptance criteria work for some environments, but not necessarily everywhere. But in an agile context, is there a possibility of doing them differently? Acceptance criteria really are the conditions that the software must satisfy. And I kind of lump in with this concept requirements. I know the requirements and acceptance criteria aren't the same thing, but in a sense they kind of help us understand what it is we're trying to do. But what I often find is, in a practical level, that they're often documented, written down. Somebody's taken the time to write them down in an electronic or an actual paper or whiteboard copy of sorts. And I often find as a tester, they're just wrong. I could look at requirements and kind of say, but you said you wanted to do that over there, but that over there means you can't do that there. Doesn't make sense to me. Why do we even bother writing them down? They're inconsistent. They could get out of date. Like we decide we're going to do something now, but then some client turns around, yeah, that's not going to work for me. Can we make sure that it works for this scenario as well? And then the company manager comes to you and says, well, that client is really too important. We've got to make sure it works well for them. So we then change what we do, but we don't update the documented requirements. And in the end, they end up being often time-consuming to produce and maintain. And the thing that kind of started me thinking about are they efficient was I had done about 3 or 4 different stories over a couple of weeks, and they had acceptance criteria, and I hadn't read them. And I kind of think, oh shit, you idiot, you didn't even read the acceptance criteria. But the thing is, we did what we needed to to satisfy the acceptance criteria, except in a couple of situations where we didn't. And I kind of thought, well, hang on, do we decide to actually do that? And in the end, we said, oh, no, we decided not to do that.
I think with your definition of requirements, I would break it down to user requirements versus solution requirements. And what you've got there are not really user requirements. You're actually talking about the solution to the problem, whereas user requirements are the problem. They are in the problem space. So for the user or for the stakeholder, you do need to document what their problem is, and that's what you need to come back to. And yes, that changes over time, but yeah, I don't know. I can understand how the solution would change.
It'll be interesting to see if after this I may have moderated where you are on that. I can see that there are definitely situations where what you've described are necessary. And I'm trying to think that maybe not necessarily. You know, I think there is an over-reliance on needing to have documented acceptance criteria, and I think there are situations where we don't need them.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying, I think that when you're kind of looking at what requirements mean, I think that there are actually different types of requirements.
For sure.
And I think developers and techie people think of requirements as being something techie, but for me, I tend to think in the problem space, so I tend to think that requirements are something that users need, which is a different definition to what you've got up there.
Could well be.
Yeah.
This is a general group of things. Well, if you go through the slides, I hope it will become more clear where I'm heading. It's not so much, I'm not trying to focus on the definitions of what acceptance criteria and requirements are.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Who wrote the acceptance criteria?
Yeah, good
Were
point.
you not involved in writing? Did you not write them?
In my little experience that I had, no, I didn't.
Who did?
The BA that worked for the squad. But there's a lot of discussion that happens as well. And
Did the BA consult with you when they were writing?
Not initially, but they allowed us to have input into what we actually did. But then there's some document that's out of date. And do we then need them written down?
Well, they're a starting point.
So how do you know what you're going to test and what your scope of testing is?
I think a lot of these questions will probably become clearer as we go through. Is there a question that's worthy now? Yeah? Okay. Let's proceed.
Somewhere you write it down.
Yeah?
Somewhere.
What's the purpose of them? Both acceptance criteria and requirements are a communication tool. Okay? They are used to align the team members to have a shared common understanding of what the client needs or desires. Okay? And the client could be an internal client or an external client. But essentially, they're a communication tool. And there are other communication tools than the written word. I did find quite often that they were unilateral communication tools, which goes to your question in terms of, was I asked what the acceptance criteria should or shouldn't be? Well, in that case, no, I wasn't. So they're often from an author, like the client, the project manager, a business owner, or a product owner, that kind of says to the developer and a tester, what do we need to do? And they're often written at the start of a project, and they're often done by people that don't necessarily have the skills, experience, or we haven't gone down the road of implementing, so we don't really necessarily have a lot of understanding of the underlying system, the architecture, code structure, or the testability of a solution, which are all important things in terms of finally delivering the new feature that's required.
Well, I think that was my point about the difference between a user requirement versus,
Yep.
other types of requirements.
Okay, so Agile, going back, interactions. We want to interact with the people in our team and our client, a product owner, and the other people or the stakeholders that are involved. Documentation, well, we don't value that as much as working software. Okay, so do we need acceptance criteria? Yes, sometimes, but maybe sometimes we don't value it as much. collaboration, really focusing on getting as quickly that feedback that you need from the people that are going to use it or the people that matter to a project, and essentially responding to change rather than following a plan. Acceptance criteria, especially when they're written at the beginning, feel like they're a plan, set in stone. This is what thou shalt do, and it feels anti-agile to me. And really, I think we should open ourselves to thinking about being aligned with the problem that someone has that we're finding a solution for. Which is essentially that top paragraph there. I've skipped ahead a little bit. It's about understanding what the client needs, but what do we need to understand? Okay, and I think there are three important parts. And I think that it's an important thing that they come at three different time stages as you implement a story. Understand the problem. So in other words, why are we doing this work? What is it that gives a person pain? And understanding why they feel the need to have some change in the software, some new feature, or a bug fix, understanding what it is that they're trying to do and having empathy for that person. I think there's a bit of a gap in there. Once you've done that, you then sort of like says, all right, I understand what it is we're going to do. Let's have a think about next about how we might provide a solution. So we need to understand the solution. And I think, for simple things, these two things happen at the same time. The problem is it doesn't display X, Y, Z, so the solution is let's display X, Y, Z. But sometimes it's sort of like, I need, to be able to do GST invoices in this scenario. Well, why do you need to do it? And then you sort of like need to start thinking, well, how might we be able to solve that problem? You do this as a team. You'll try and work out, how's it going to work? And how would you develop it, in terms of, is there the system architecture in place to support the solution that you've got in mind? And an important part, I think, which needs to be asked early on, how are you going to test it? Are you going to implement it with some new, Angular 2? Does anyone have any Angular 2 testing tools? I think Protractor does it, but it's pretty new. Is there a UI for Protractor? I haven't heard of one yet. So, how testable is that solution? Not as much as if you were to use other more common things. And then finally, at this point, once we've kind of discussed and agreed what the solutions should be, people actually go and do the grunt work. The dev starts doing their developing, the writing the actual code and stuff like that. They've got a good firm idea what the solution should be, and they just need to turn the handle on that code. In the same way the tester goes away and says, well, I now know what the solution is going to look like. These are the kind of things I'm going to want to test. I'm not just going to test how it works for the user. I now know how the architecture works. So I'm going to see what happens if that bit of the architecture is no longer available. It's got an error or something. Water's got into the server room and that part of the system's down. Okay? Does it fail gracefully? You can only do that kind of thing by understanding the architecture. And then once the dev's done their first cut, they've done a little bit of rudimentary testing, and the tester's got a test plan together, the dev effectively kind of hands over and we're into a bug finding and fixing phase, which is the understanding the implementation, where the dev shares with the tester how they've implemented it. The tester is able to ask the dev questions to explore their understanding of what's been changed. And it's important that the dev and the test work together, with the final goal being how well does the tester understand the solution so that they can test it. And at the same stage, the tester gets a sense of how well does the developer understand what they've implemented, and have they understood the rest of the system in which this change is being introduced, to make sure that they understand where some of the risks might be. So you explore the implementation. One, does it work? Get an early demo out. Make sure that the people that need to see how it's going to work, get a chance to see it early. And it says, oh shit, I don't like that colour, or I don't like that being over on that part of the screen. You might get from your product owner or your BA. Discuss how it works, and not everybody likes this as a tester, but I kind of like to get a code walkthrough with the dev. Now that's not to understand the line by line how they did things, and it's not a challenge to them. Why did you do it this way? I often tend to look more at the name of a method or a name of a file or a module, because it gives me an indication. The file name that's changed is the fee calculator module. I wonder where that's used. So it doesn't, I don't care about the actual code that they may have changed. I care that they've changed something that could be used through the entire sell process. And hence my test effort, I've just said doubles, because it might affect other verticals. Whereas if it's something that's just on the Modus homepage, then I know it's not going to leak out to other places. So there's a bit of a timeline that I've kind of gone through. Client has a problem. We add it to the backlog, and we prioritize and add it to the sprint. These things are done by the client. The BA gets involved, and the product owner also as well. Understanding that problem. Sometimes if there's any BAs in the room, it's sometimes called the Three Amigos meeting. We do it at the beginning. We're trying to investigate, trying to understand the problem, and really the BA takes the lead in this. At least it does with TradeMe, in that they like to really bring us all up to speed as to what's the pain that the client or the user has. We all go away, we investigate our solutions, we try and resolve any questions, because out of this meeting we may find that, well, actually we're not really sure what the problem is, because the dev or the test may have asked some questions about what's important to the client or the product owner. Understanding the solution. I don't know whether anyone's read the blog from Atlassian, who developed Jira. They got a thread going on quality assistance rather than quality assurance. And they talk about the test notes meeting. That's where we try and understand the solution, and where the developer and the test and the BA explore how it is we're going to solve this problem. We write our code, we do our test plan, and we do that dev demo and the code walkthrough. We're trying to understand the implementation. That's led by the dev. Sometimes, and obviously the test is quite important there too. I do find occasionally that the BA and the PO like to see this as well, because it's sort of like the first time that the solution sees the light of day outside the dev's machine. And it's a really early point to identify that's just not going to work. You'll get that back from the PO occasionally. We do some testing, we do some bug fixes, which tends to be the test responsibility, and then we do the final demo before we deploy. And for us at TradeMe, the product owner is the person that always has to have seen a demo before deploy, and then the deploy is led by the test people. That's me. Sure. Did you want longer?
Sorry?
You asked for a second. Did you want longer? Sorry, always testing, always testing.
How long does it take? So you get involved with the Three Amigos part. How long does it take for the Three Amigos through to deploy?
I'm a context-driven tester. It depends. If I've got a big story, then it could take a while. We often skip the Three Amigos, and we just, because it's so obvious sometimes, in the sense that there's a bug that doesn't display something that ought to display, so therefore the problem is easy. How we're going to fix it is easy. We probably don't need to meet for very long. But generally speaking, I would deploy, if I've got meaty stories, about 1 story a week, 1 to 2 stories a week, so this whole iteration would be in the order of days worth of effort. It could be spread over a week or 2.
You didn't mention pair programming. You had mentioned walkthrough, you haven't mentioned code inspection.
This because those things are individual tasks that the squad performs. In other words, the squad may choose to do those things, but they happen as part of it. So in other words, when we're doing a code walkthrough, the dev comes to my machine, I've pulled down the code branch, and we're walking through the code together at my PC. We sit together. If there's a bug that happens on my machine, I will bring the dev over and we'll sit together, do stuff together. We may do some cross-pollination with other squads, and there may be an automation tool or a trick that I've picked up. I might want to share it with another tester from another squad. So we do a lot of those things, but there are lessons that I've learned, for sure, but not the three that I've talked about tonight.
Do you manage the adherence to standards and SOPs?
There are no standards. The standard is that the squad has the responsibility to do an awesome job, and we trust them to do that, and they have full autonomy over how they choose to do that. If they choose to adopt a standard, it's their choice.
Do they?
Yes, we do. Yeah. But usually we find there's things missing in standards. We like to follow through. I find that TradeMe is a lot of the people are quite in tune with the things that other people are learning around the globe. You know, I notice a lot of the people do a lot of professional development, and they keep track of, you know, the various blogs that they're interested in, and quite often people will take the opportunity to organise, you know, they might just announce to the Auckland holders, I'm going to talk about some blog that I wrote. Anyone want to discuss it? And that information filters out through the company.
Very quickly, what was the purpose of test notes meeting?
The test notes meeting? To understand the solution. So in other words, before the dev really starts hammering out the code, the dev starts to architect a solution to the thing. And I think it's important for that design of the solution that involves more than just one person. I think it needs to involve several roles and perspectives in the squad. So that primarily for me, that meeting is, yeah, that sounds awesome, but how am I going to test it? And to ask that question up front so that the dev gets the opportunity, hey Vince, I put that hook in the code so you can make this change that allow you to test this bit. I've added this configuration setting that tests your DB connection string so that you can change it and break it to see what happens if the database is no longer available. If the dev hard codes that string, I can't test a broken database unless I physically remove that database, which is a much harder thing given I don't have access to that machine.
So this timeline is for one item.
Yep.
So this is one problem, and you don't take a new problem until this is deployed.
No, we usually have...
About next one in the middle of this process.
Generally speaking, in our squads, we have 2 devs, 1 tester, and we share a BA between 2 squads. 2 devs, it's inefficient for them to work on the same story usually. You end up with too many code conflicts. So the 2 devs are usually working on 1 or 2 stories themselves, and the tester will then just try and pick the next one that's ready to go. So there's usually about 3 to 4 of these little timelines that are going on concurrently.
So do you follow any agile methodologies like Scrum or Kanban, or
Yep.
do you, it doesn't depend on each squad?
Each squad gets to choose, and they do tend to cherry pick the things from Scrum and from Kanban. I'm in a squad at the moment that was doing some metrics-driven development, which is much more about A/B testing, and so we're putting a change out, they see how well it does, and that then feeds into the next thing. Sprints didn't work because you couldn't plan ahead to the next experiment because you're waiting on how successful was your first one. So we worked very much on a Kanban swim lanes approach, whereas now TradeMe's moving to a responsive website, and we're going to aim to turn off the old website in the next 6 months. And that's really, we've broken it all down into big chunks of work, and we're slicing it up, and we're really going to have a burn-up chart for each of the sections. So we're back into doing sprints. So we've gone back to a Scrum kind of thing.
Got a bit of a conflict going on in my mind. I would have imagined that the scenario where you said sometimes the acceptance criteria is out of date.
Yep.
I would have thought that that would occur not in previous stories where the answer is obvious, like if field missing is from being displayed, we've got to display it, as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
So you imagine that's where you don't necessarily need an acceptance criteria because it's so obvious.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, those sort of scenarios would not lend themselves to the situation where the acceptance criteria is out of date because it's so obvious, that's it, there's no scope for it to change. And on the other hand, where you've got more complex stories where the outcomes, I guess, a little bit more uncertain and there's more to do in that story. That's where I would imagine it will get more important to have, because in this approach, the customer, who is the ultimate approver, if you like, of the output, is not actually involved in defining what will a valid solution be. So, for example, customer says, I don't like the interior of my car. That's a fairly complex thing to solve, right? It's not as simple as adding a 4-seat or a 5-seat.
Just time out for a second.
How do you do usability testing though? That would involve testing on customers, wouldn't it? Usability research.
Yeah, that feeds in. The PO is effectively our customer. We can't talk to 4 million Kiwis that use TradeMe.
But you must surely talk to some Kiwis who use TradeMe.
We do, as users. We work for TradeMe, we use it as well. We do get input. We have a UX team.
Yeah, but you're a savvy, IT savvy person. You're not an 88-year-old grandmother.
I'm a professional tester. One of my tasks is to have empathy for her and try and think what it would be like if I was someone that was 80 years old and not familiar with things. The UX side of things, they become a resource that's available in the company. So we have UX people that do UX testing, and they give us guidance and feedback on what we should and shouldn't do, and they tell us the kind of things that do and don't work. And then, so as a squad, we're trusted to know when we should get that feedback. If we've had no experience with it, we go to them often. But over time, we learn the things that they care about and the kind of things they expect to have. And the UX team is quite closely associated with the graphic designers as well, because the two often go, hand in glove to some degree. How usable a site is often determined by how it looks and feels.
Sorry, going back to my question, I was just going to finish by saying that we got the PO involved up until the point they said we got a problem and we got to prioritize and add it to sprint XYZ or whatever number it might be. Unless we define an acceptance criteria at that point, what we have done until the time the PO then sees the solution, like the first dead demo, what we've done as the three amigos is produce a solution that we think solves a problem, which may not be a solution that the PO thinks would solve the problem. They don't get the exposure until something's built, so you spend about a few days at least doing it.
At TradeMe, the BA tends to be the proxy for the PO. So the BA is sort of like, the PO gets involved in terms of prioritising stuff. The BA is entrusted with knowing when to call the PO in. And quite often there are discussions and you kind of says, well, actually that's a decision we can't make. We need to get an external resource to help us. So the PO then becomes an external resource to help us make those decisions. And the same way that we might go to design or to UX or to platform for an architectural decision.
Do you do story pointing? And if you do, what sort of ratio do you sort of allocate across the team in terms of if Deb say something's going to take 3 days to develop, how long does it take you to test?
We never estimate how long it's going to take something. Your burn-up chart will help you to look at rough estimates of what happens there. We do use story points, and when we do our estimation, the squad uses story point poker, where we use the Fibonacci series for points. We don't equate those with time, and the squad is expected to estimate the effort that the squad performs. And it's back to that thing we were talking about before, where you can never break it down to less than the squad. The squad develops, the squad tests, the squad exerts amount of effort to deliver something. So some stories are dev heavy and test light, some are test heavy and dev light, and some are in the middle. But as a squad, we try and generate a certain number of, allocate a certain number of points to a story of how complicated we feel it is. If we come up with different values when we play this story poker game, if they're too far apart, it indicates that people don't have the understanding yet to make that estimate. And we end up with a more deeper discussion about what the story is going to do and what the likely solution is for that and how hard or complicated that might be.
So what's story pointing?
It's a way of being able to allocate a size to a story. There are some stories that are small and easy to do, and there are stories that are big chunks of work. And if they get too big, if people say, I'm going to give this, 13 or 20-something points, it's an indication that the story's too big and you need to split it or find a way to carve it up.
And presumably the poker game, each of you writing 10, making your own guess and not telling anybody else, and then...
Oh, it just means that you have a bunch of cards that just have numbers on them, and you just flip the card up and you show to everybody, right, that's my number of what I think this story is worth. The important thing is that... No. It's
Disappointing game of poker.
Yeah, there are no winners. It's just that you end up doing it with cards. And... For sure.
So I think we have to close off question time there.
Cool.
Let's thank Vincent for that, sharing his insights and experiences.
Cool.
So we've got some food and drink outside here. So if you have some questions that you haven't had answered, feel free to harass Vincent there. Just a few the next event is on the 24th of August. So make a note, it's in a couple of weeks' time. And once again, thank all the volunteers and the sponsors, Searle, ASB and Surety, and post feedback on Meetup. Thank you very much.